Halo Campaign Evolved has come out, and now the dust is settling a bit and we can see some concrete numbers, and what's become evident is that this game is not having the splash I think 343 nor Microsoft was hoping for on most platforms. Doesn't mean that it's a flop per se, but let's get into it, and there's a lot more, from buggy releases, people mad that you won't accept this, and generally speaking how Microsoft and Xbox have fostered an environment so mediocre and problematic that it's no wonder why people are walking away from what should have been one of the biggest releases of the year. Firstly, from altchar.com is seen here, Halo Remake has peaked at just about 25,000 players on Steam, which is honestly pretty terrible, all things considered, for a game that's supposed to be of this magnitude. Some may say, well, that's pretty good, right? Well, no, actually, because here, look at Halo Infinite's Steam player count when it came out. As you can see there, that game reached a peak of 272,000 players during the height of its own release, which means that Halo Campaign Evolved has only reached 9.19% of the total players that Infinite, 343's previously released Halo game, managed to hit as well, which is frankly abysmal considering this is technically 343, now called Halo Studios' first major release since rebranding the company after the disastrous development cycles of 343's previous Halo games. Some may say that's fatigue, but I think it's a combination of things. Firstly, the game is a remake of a game that 343 already did an anniversary remastered edition of in the past. Secondly, it's because the game has, well, zero multiplayer whatsoever, which personally, that's a big reason why I don't think it's worth the asking price. They could have at least taken Bungie's original multiplayer design maps and implemented an online matchmaking system with crossplay, and that would have easily led to this game exploding in player numbers, but they didn't do it, which I think is a massive missed opportunity by both Halo Studios and Microsoft, and I would wager if they were smart, whenever they end up inevitably remaking Halo 2, they should probably add multiplayer and don't reject it like they did here. Because as an OG Halo fan myself, and I'm sure you guys are too, we all know how important multiplayer is to Halo's core experience. The amount of fun that you've had sniping your buddies, running them over, or shooting somebody's Warthog with an RPG in midair to see them ragdoll. Yeah, it was almost a rite of passage for millennials, right? And there's no way that Microsoft is looking at Halo Campaign Evolved Steam numbers, and that they're happy knowing that their peak after years away is barely 10% of what Infinite did. That is embarrassing, although Microsoft likely doesn't think the Steam nor Xbox versions of the game are the main mission here. After all, I would guess their main objective here was breaking into the PlayStation Store, which in my opinion is the major reason this game was even remade in the first place. Although the only person I've seen claiming that Halo Campaign Evolved is a massive success is this random tweet here that claims that Halo has topped the PSN Store, but that's not an official source, obviously, and since not a single website, at least as of me making this video, has touted Halo's success on PlayStation, this makes me believe this game's release is not going the way they wanted it to. Frankly, if this flops on PlayStation, which I doubt, but Microsoft might not even release a Halo 2 remake on Sony's hardware in the future. Again, I keep saying, all we really wanted was the Bungie-made Halo games ported, as they were 20 years ago, with trophy support of course, and cross-play multiplayer, that's it. The fact that this can't be done, but instead the entire game needs to be remade in a worse state is kind of baffling to me, as TrueAchievements.com reported here. Halo Remake's premium launch is barely half that of Forza Horizon 6's. As they confirmed here where I highlighted, Forza has outdone Halo, which is frankly embarrassing considering the legacy of what Halo should mean, yet here we are. As seen here, Halo's premium access saw about 58.1% of players, which is the core audience obviously for this sort of game, playing it compared to Forza Horizon 6. If I had to guess, the reasoning is simple. People are just fatigued with 343's version of Halo-made games, and I don't blame them. But it is still baffling, because if you told me 10 years ago that one day we would get a remake of Halo 1 of all things on PlayStation, I would have called you crazy. That would be the gaming equivalent of Nintendo releasing the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time remake on PlayStation 5 pretty much. But the thing is that the remake we got is riddled with bugs, it removes content, and overall dilutes the package, meaning that you're paying more for less, which is never a good sign. Honestly, I would expect this Halo remake to hit PS Plus in a year or two max if I had to guess. There's really no reason to buy this right now, knowing how much they gutted here while asking for me to pay full price for it instead. A Halo game with no multiplayer just doesn't sit right with me. That's like selling me a Mario Kart game today, but it has no online multiplayer either. Like, what's the point? I'm sure Campaign Evolved is doing just fine on Game Pass, but I mean, that's Game Pass. It's never been a good analysis of whether a game will do well commercially or not. And we know that Game Pass has virtually no effect on people buying a game day one on other platforms, even if it's located there. Palworld, after all, was also day one on Game Pass. Yet despite that, as you can see here by Palworld Steam chart numbers, that game still surpassed 2.1 million concurrent players on Steam despite it, again, being on Game Pass day one. Starfield, as you can see there, managed to hit 330,000 players on Steam at release despite also being a day one Game Pass game as well. Subnautica 2, as you can also see here, hit well over 467,000 players, despite being day one on Game Pass on Steam too. Even Outriders, as seen here over 5 years ago on Steam charts, managed to hit almost 6 times what Halo Campaign Evolve's numbers on Steam day one, and that's as a new IP. And also being on Game Pass and being available to obviously less players because it was, well, 5 years ago, of course, so smaller base. Here's also Forza Horizon 5 Steam charts, over 3 times and then some what Campaign Evolve's numbers did. Also day one on Game Pass at release, and it achieved this almost 5 years ago as well. Even Warhammer 40k Darktide released almost 4 years ago day one, again on Game Pass, and managed to hit 4 times the release numbers of Halo Remake. And even right now, this very instant, as I write the video, Darktide has more players playing it on Steam than Campaign Evolved. Again, 4 years ago. And of course, like I showed you earlier, Halo Infinite had almost like 272,000 players on Steam despite also day one Game Pass. Do I really need to show you any more evidence to prove to you that this game's release, when stacked up against previous games that released the exact same way, either in the same franchise or like more unknown things, have done remarkably better despite having less players to pull from, both as IPs and from Game Pass as a whole, when it compares to the crutches that Halo Remake has been using to prop itself up like this? This is the power of 343 Industries, everybody. Only they could take a game as beloved as Halo and deliver the most milquetoast content removed version of a genuine masterpiece that we've ever seen. And I shudder to think what they're doing currently to Halo 2 or 3 right now as we speak. For example, here's a clip where the UNSC soldier that used to be able to shoot you constantly no matter where you moved now can barely keep up with you and won't even shoot you if you're right up in front of him. I mean, come on, watch this clip.
Stay back! Stay back! You're not turning me into one of those things! I'll blow your brains out! Get away from me! Ah! Ah! Don't touch me, you freaks! I won't be like you, I'll die first! They won't get me! Find your own hiding place, the monsters are everywhere! Play dead! That's what I did! Play dead! They took the live ones. Oh god, I can still hear them. Monsters! Ah! 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 Just leave me alone! Sarge, Mendoza, Basseni. Oh God, the things took them away, away, away. Oh God, I don't want to be like them, please. Please no, please no.
It's kind of baffling to see that, but the game is also buggy at times, as Mr. Reb's gaming shows in this clip, so please watch this too.
Bingo! That's the last of the motor tanks. Let's sweep and clear the stragglers, team.
That's right, guys, the Scorpion tanks just visually delete parts of their own hardware and work anyways, because why not, I guess? Modern gaming, I guess that's how it is. Or how about this clip showing Unreal Engine 5 just absolutely crapping itself and borderline falling apart in real time? Watch this. Wow, that looked great. Or how about this clip of playing Halo Remake on Legendary difficulty, you know, the hardest mode available, and the enemy AI being so incompetent you can just casually walk up behind them and slam them in their backs. Don't believe me? Okay, watch this too.
Mother of God! I never thought I'd get this close to one of these things. How the hell are we going to get inside that monster?
The Covenant use a gravity lift to move troops and supplies between the ship and the surface. We need to ambush them at the grav lift's loading zone and use the lift to enter the ship.
It kind of gets to a point, you know what I mean? It just starts to not feel like the game you enjoyed as a kid anymore, but a weird, twisted version of what once was. Even IGN is seen here in their review. They call the remake not essential, which is, well, if IGN is saying that, it's not a great look. Because IGN tends to swallow the loads of anybody who pays them, so that's concerning. Of course, the apologists are out in full force, like this guy who said, Halo Campaign Evolved is an excellent remake. I don't pay attention to the miserable complainers because they aren't real Halo fans to begin with. Yeah, the classic, if you have anything negative to say about anything, you're not a real fan shtick. Very cool. Great idea. Or how about this guy who said, starting to realize that a lot of Halo fans are just straight up miserable and will never be happy with any modern Halo game. All of these guys just sound like the gaming equivalent of this meme here on screen that says, come on, fellow gamers, if we all lower our standards, then all games are good. That's what these guys sound like to me. Look, I'm not saying they can't enjoy the game. Good on them. I hope they do because they bought it, obviously. But just because you have a problem with something doesn't mean that you're not a fan. I think the reason the backlash is what it is and comes from the fact that people are fans to begin with. If nobody cared, well, nobody would be talking about it. Backlash comes from a place of passion. You think I want Halo to be in the gutter the way that it is right now? Of course not. I would love for an actual faithful Halo game to be made, but not by 343. I would rather anyone but them make a Halo game going forward, but this continuous lack of spine from people who just tend to lay on their backs and let these companies have their way with their wallets is something I honestly can't abide by. You should be demanding better. If everything is getting more expensive, so too will your games, right? Now more than ever, video games and what they cost and deliver, that should matter the most. You shouldn't just be accepting things for what they are if the things being made do not meet even your lowest of expectations. As I said in other videos, I'm not saying don't play the remake. You do you. I'm not going to laugh at you or talk down to you if you did buy it. I'm just saying that you can and should be allowed to be critical about things that you love is all, right? Look, if you bought Halo Remake, I'm not going to think less of you. I get it. You wanted to play Halo. You missed those games. You wanted something fun to play. I totally understand. You're not going to get like any ill will from me there at all, okay? But even if you did buy it or whatever, you are still allowed to voice your opinions because that's what the internet's for. I hope people understand that this conversation doesn't come from an ill-minded place. It's passion, guys. I love Halo. You love Halo. We want cool Halo games. We're not getting that currently, and that's the problem here. But I think the other problem besides 343 lies in their parent company, Microsoft. And the core fundamental aspects of what Xbox is doing, in my opinion, is the antithesis of art. It's actually instead turning video games into terrible rental services that nobody seems to care about, as IGN said here. That Game Pass was meant to save Xbox, but it's not doing that. Instead, it's dragging everything down into a whirlpool of stupid. As IGN says here, the idea of putting expensive games meant to be sold day one on Game Pass wasn't universally loved, which has now become very obvious. Because publishers believe that it would devalue the idea of what a video game is and what it can do, which I do agree. Because it replaces how studios can use stuff like copies sold as a valuable metric to then secure funding for their next game. Instead, if you release on Game Pass, you're using nebulous things like playtime or players reached, but not actual metrics that actually matter. Oh, your game reached 1 million players, but how much money did it make? Tell me again why this is impressive exactly. I've said for years on this channel that Game Pass was and still is Xbox's greatest mistake, because they ended up conditioning an entire generation of captive players into viewing their entertainment as disposable and something not worth investing into. Not only did they not own the games, but it was just games that they could lose once the service would remove them, making these games feel even less meaningful or worthy of your time or energy. Who cares if some game gets removed, right? You paid like $20 to play that and more every month anyway, so who cares? Yeah, it does devalue games, but this trickle-down effect also went into the kinds of games that got made for the service too, which was subpar, mostly made games that weren't great enough to buy, but good enough, as they would say for something like Game Pass, which was always a condescending way of saying that if this game needed to survive on sales alone, like the whole traditional sense, the studio would be shutting down. But since it's playable on this service amongst hundreds of other games for one price, then yeah, I guess it's fine for what it is. But this sort of mentality leads to another big crippling issue, which is the acceptance of mediocrity, because the developers then have no reason to make actual genre-defining games, because there's no incentive or risk involved anymore. This is why in a current Xbox environment, if Halo was a, let's say, a new IP right today, it would never be created within the framework that Microsoft has implemented here and exists within. Halo existed and was what it was because it was made in a way because of the fear of failure failure and the drive to make something truly special to stand out. This is why the usual people are so lukewarm and passive when it comes to Campaign Evolved's quality, because to them, at its core, it's a Game Pass game. Therefore, it's good enough to play for a subscription, but not necessarily to buy outright. And this design philosophy, I'm going to say it for what it is, it's cancer. Because if 343 or Halo Studios had to survive on creating games actually meant to be bought and played at full price only, Campaign Evolved would not be enough. I would be surprised if this game has even sold 1 million copies yet to be real. This sort of environment of, let's just call it disposable entertainment that Microsoft has pioneered has really only done one thing, which is create a race to the bottom of the barrel. Largely speaking, most of Game Pass's first-party offerings are shallow, uninspired experiences that would never survive in a normal, traditional, transactional environment. Instead, you're fed slop for slop's sake. Pete Hines, the former VP of Bethesda, said this after he left the company due to Microsoft buying them out. Here's what he said. When you talk about a subscription that relies on content, if you don't figure out how to balance the needs of the service and the people running the service with the people who are providing the content, without which your subscription is worth jack you know what, then you have a real problem. And he is right, because what has Game Pass really done? It's never been a service where a game was made internally at Microsoft Studios that then became, let's say, Game of the Year material. Sure, some will say, well, what about Clair Obscur? That was day one on Game Pass, wasn't it? You're right. But it wasn't made in-house at any studio that Microsoft owned, which is my point. You can't create genre-defining experiences within this atmosphere that Xbox has going on right now. All you can reasonably do is remix what already exists, or remake something, like in Halo's case, and then just hope that it's enough. As seen here in a leaked document, Microsoft was actually paying upwards of $300 million to acquire the rights to games like Kill the Justice League and Star Wars Jedi Survivor to appear on Game Pass. Yeah, this is not a sustainable model. Microsoft could have used that money to create the next Halo or multiple games, but they would likely know that that money, even if they did spend it correctly that way, it would still not result in games that would get made due to the overall atmosphere they have going on here. And it proves that, right? Considering how busted 343's design philosophy is anyways, right? The layoffs and turnover rate at 343 or Halo Studios now are so well documented that it would be safe to assume that every mainline Halo game they've ever made was practically made from the ground up by a completely different team pretty much every time. And that the institutional knowledge that has been lost thanks to how Microsoft and Xbox currently run things has had unmistakable cascading altering effects on everything from their first-party studios. So how can a new Halo even begin to exist in an environment like this where everything is one wrong move away from shifting the bolts off these car frames and 343 just ends up flying into traffic at terminal velocity because nothing is being done properly? They're just cutting corners. This is why you're getting the safer option, right? Remake the older games, but they're also going to be removing the soul and integrity from them, hoping that you don't notice. It doesn't work like it used to, and people are tired of it, right? Let me read you this next part in full because it's important. The Activision Blizzard acquisition began a series of cataclysmic financial consequences for Xbox. 2024's Black Ops 6 is the highest grossing game in Call of Duty's 23-year history, but 82% of all sales came from PlayStation. While Xbox had the smaller share, Game Pass scuppered Microsoft's chance to make a fortune in Call of Duty's most financially successful year ever. According to an anonymous Xbox employee via Bloomberg, the company lost $300 million in sales as a direct result of placing its latest blockbuster on the service. And why would anyone pay $70 for a game that they could pay $15 to access alongside 400 others? Exactly why this doesn't work. And this is cannibalizing not only sales, but the goodwill and the drive for these developers to stay anywhere long term. You guys know the term quiet quitting? If you don't, it's when an employee they don't leave the job, but they also stop pushing themselves to perform better, and instead they just start doing the bare minimum so they can just collect their paycheck and go home. That's quiet quitting. Anyways, I feel like that has to be something permeating all throughout Xbox's first-party studios at this point. Just loads of people doing the bare minimum, because why bother? Who cares if that Marine can't shoot you like he used to in Combat Evolved? It doesn't matter if the tanks glitch or if the gun's aim is off or any other multitude of problems permeating throughout these games. It doesn't matter. It just has to be the bare minimum, and that should be enough. It's not like there's an incentive to do better. All Halo Campaign Evolved will end up having as its legacy is being seen as a weaker and worse version of a game already made better 20 years ago. And beyond that, it will only exist in spreadsheet PowerPoint presentations for Xbox. To go and say, look, it reached this many players. Shame about the sales though, right? Microsoft at least smartfully removed Modern Warfare 4 from the Game Pass pool. So now if somebody wants to play that game, they're going to have to buy it. But that doesn't fix the issues at the core here. When you have people, like I've shown you already, slurping up the slop off 343's toilet seat and then calling it delicious because they don't want to lose access, it's no wonder why what you're getting still can't hold a candle to a game that was again released over 20 years ago. Because it doesn't matter how many fancy lights you put in your game, how nice the water looks, or if the sounds sound vaguely similar, they are still not the same. I've even been told by people who actually worked on Halo Combat Evolved that the sound mixing present in Campaign Evolved is actually completely off and pales in comparison to the original. The whole thing's a mess, okay? I'm sure the usual types will try to tout this as a success, but the reality is, a remake of the first Halo should have been a monumental release. It should have dropped like an atom bomb on the players out here, but instead it has arrived like the dead warhead in Megaton in like Fallout 3 at this point. Sure, it's there, I guess it could explode, but do we care enough? Not really, no. Halo fans deserved better, but the culture and environment fostered to create these games is so abysmal that it's really no wonder that people are walking away the way that they are. If this is the best that 343 and Xbox can do, with the absolute crown jewel of their empire, imagine how little they care about everything that's even less important to them. It's bleak, I know, it needed to be said. This isn't Halo, just let it die and move on already. What do you think? Let me know. Thanks for watching, subscribe if you'd like to. I'll continue to remember Halo as it was. At least then I can love those games as time capsules at least. But for me, unfortunately, Halo is dead, and maybe that's for the best.